Hello, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful session. My name is Meredith Todd. I'm the new city planner, sustainability planner, and sometimes housing planner at the city of McCall. Raise your hand if you know where McCall is. Okay, don't tell anyone. Raise your hand if you don't know where McCall is. Look it up and then immediately forget. And this is my friend Rachel.
Hi, and I'm Rachel Leishman. I'm from Brundage Mountain Resort, and I am the new sustainability manager.
So this is us. I believe they're sending out these slide decks, so we're not going to read these things verbatim. But both of our positions being named in sustainability is relatively new in both McCall itself and in the state of Idaho. So we're kind of the crazy people that are taking on these wild titles and trying to get things done. But you can learn more about us later.
And today we're going to go over our mountain community, the challenges we face, collaborative opportunities, data-driven decision-making, future challenges and opportunities, key takeaways, and our call to action.
Our community, as of some of our most recent planning escapades, is about 73% second homes. We're about 99 miles north of the Boise Treasure Valley, so we're a perfect distance away for people to create what the last session called your second home backyard. So if there's NIMBYs, it's NIMSBys in our community at this point, not in my second backyard, please. Our permanent population, yes, it's pretty funny. I enjoyed it a lot. Our permanent population is kind of 3,600, but that was during that census year where we're all kind of like, and then our annual snowfall amount in town is usually around 140, 150 inches, but last year was pretty bad. And our annual greenhouse gas emissions, probably an undercount, is getting close to 100,000 tons of carbon equivalents per year.
So Brundage is a mid-sized resort. We have about 150,000 skier visits per year. Our lift access terrain is 1,920 acres, and we typically see a snowfall of 320 inches, but last year it was 228 inches. And unfortunately, this has big impacts for us. And our vertical drop is 1,921 feet. We have 5 lifts and a lot of backcountry terrain, about 8,000 acres. And our annual greenhouse gases are 4,267.
So when we think about doing climate action or environmental stewardship in Idaho, we have to be careful about the words that we choose to say, especially depending on who might be listening. So we have a pretty busy state legislature year after year, even though they only work 3 or 4 months out of the year. And they are seeing a lot of opportunities to kind of hit pause on doing the best practices that a lot of mountain communities hold true and dear. So in the last 2 legislative sessions alone, we've seen a few bills that haven't gone all the way through passing basically anti-ESG standards for investment, et cetera. They haven't been signed by the governor's office yet because they've been informed by accounting professionals that that might not actually be a good idea. And then they're currently working on changes and freezing the various building and energy codes in the state. So they've taken that out of the power of local municipalities to manage based on your community's snowfall or temperature or any other situations that usually guide municipal regulation of building codes. So that's been a new hurdle to be in place. I think they're frozen around a red line version of 2018. If you have any particular factual questions for that, I would direct you to Charlie Woodruff in the back, because he might know better, but voluntolding you, Charlie. And then last, we're seeing a lot of just like sample bills being floated into the State House every single year from national lobbying groups. And there's just a lot of appetite to pass them and little weighing of consequences at this point. So we're trying to see a little bit more of a diplomatic approach focused on like consumer protection, but at this point it's a very, very fast moving train that we're like, no, please stop, please.
And with that too, one of the biggest things that we have to do together is rely on each other and create these allies and partnerships. And just like many other mountain communities, we face similar challenges. Limited housing solutions, we have need for service workers, threats to our natural resources through climate conditions changing, wildfires, water quality issues, drought, insects and disease, and invasive species. So these problems are made worse, right, by the regulations in rural Idaho, which affects our efforts to develop sustainably.
And I think this picture is like particularly interesting because this is like the top of one of our main ski lifts at Brundage, and then this is the burn scar from, is that the Rainbow Fire? Yeah. 2 years ago? Yeah. And then there's been other fires like on the resort grounds even this year. So we're seeing these things happen, but it feels like we're being consumed by an attitude of adaptation before we even think about mitigation in the communities that we're living in. So it's kind of an out-of-body experience at this point in the Intermountain West. And then a lot of you are probably familiar with the fun little graphics that go in plans to show like what are all of the different pillars of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but I wanted to show you the version of what doing this in Idaho looks like. So for the most part, whenever we think of like a really, really good regulation, such as like increasing your minimum R value in new construction, simple things like that, we're like, oh, just put a slash through it, unless you tie it to some form of monetary incentive, most likely. So that makes needing to weigh and get into public and private partnerships all the more important, and it makes a lot of things dependent on partnerships. So for example, when we've been approaching the idea of the climate action plan, we know that as a municipality in a place that doesn't necessarily have a lot of educational background, we have to be working with the people who are directly affected out in the ski resort or hopefully in the construction industry. We can make some connections with people who are feeling those effects and starting to think, oh, we might need to make some adaptations, but they don't really know what to do yet. So we're really focused on education and making sure that we're having regular conversations about it rather than sweeping it under the rug. And then the last part that's kind of a big mystery is always funding and financing. I know this is true in every single community, but we also have the challenge of there's not state allocated funding. There hasn't been a victory on CPRG funding for the state of Idaho. Our taxation abilities are limited to ballot initiative focused local option taxes only in resort communities with populations less than 10,000. I could go on and on and on. But we have to be very, very clever about making money fall from the sky or come from between the mattresses. So if you have any crazy ideas on where to find money, let me know.
So this year was really challenging for the McCall area, and I think that the photo to the left really shows how difficult the wildfire season was this year. So we are located in the southwest Idaho landscape called the Sill, which is a national priority landscape for wildfire risk mitigation with numerous surrounding communities, recreation areas, and ecosystems at risk. So Brundage, McCall, all fall in that. In 2024 alone, there were 14 named fires which burned in our area with over 205,000 acres burned, and they're still burning. This after the lowest snow year on record in the West Central Mountains just really showcases what the challenges we're gonna face in the future. And with Brundage, we really rely heavily on natural snowfall, and so we need to find adaptation strategies to keep our doors open and ski.
I think the other thing that we're starting to see that's probably happening in your communities as well is that the insurance landscape is changing super duper rapidly. So pretty much anywhere along a lot of these fire corridors, I'm getting more and more phone calls into the city planning part of my office every single day about, I have to sell my house because my insurance isn't being renewed, or what are you going to do when they're telling me I need to cut down this 250-year-old ponderosa pine that's within 20 feet of my house? I'm like, well, that's up to the State Department of Insurance at this point until they give us a little bit of ability to make our own regulations in this community. But what we're looking at is also increased cost of living and doing business in our community where it was already elevated, and I'm sure that that resonates with a lot of you. In addition, not Brundage, but our other resort in the area, Tamarack Resort, had to evacuate this year due to a wildfire that was creeping up to its southern boundary area. In the same time that we're navigating Tamarack wishing to expand its operations into that burn scar direction over the course of their plan. So we're kind of grappling again with these things are happening, what are we doing? Nobody knows, but at least we're trying to talk about it. Oh, I should also say on that one, we're lucky because McCall is like the hub for the smoke jumpers in this part of the region. So we do have that resource and a lot of jumpers that live locally in our community. And I think that they've done a lot of work just thinning things out voluntarily to help out the community. So there's always a question of like, can you activate those citizens that work on the front lines that happen to just live in your community? And that's a big question we like to pursue.
So collaboration and partnership opportunities. So Brundage plays a pivotal role in advocating for workforce housing and innovative solutions to combat scarcity. And so we renovated the Meadows House in New Meadows, Idaho, which is 15 minutes on the other side of McCall. And this is a sustainable and affordable housing solution because we renovated a building that was already in place. And in exchange, we also offer housing for the U.S. Forest Service, Payette National Forest, and National Forest Foundation during our summer months when we have empty beds. And we also rent in the winter months from Shore Lodge to give more opportunity for affordable housing for our employees.
The other really important partnership that Brundage provides is they show up to every single master planning opportunity that we have in the community, both as an economic stakeholder, but also as one that needs to find housing for their employees, that needs to compete in the same workforce marketplace as everyone else, and as a major landholder in the community. They also are a holder of retail space, but they don't take that responsibility lightly. For example, whenever we have new affordable housing projects that are very rarely proposed in our very, very small, not used to vertical development community, they will show up and provide letters of support to the planning and zoning meetings, to the city council meetings, and they do the same now that we're approaching grant opportunities for renewable energy and charging fueling infrastructure grants as they come around, because maybe they can't access those opportunities as a private company and they don't necessarily have the funding yet, but they know that we are eligible and hopefully they can add on some weight to our applications. I think that we've been more successful in housing than sustainability grant opportunities at this point, but it's really, really nice to know that we have a big business voice coming in and saying, no, we need to support this local community who's trying. So the other thing that Brundage has been great about providing support for has been our transit. Our World of Transit in Idaho is not funded through any general fund source at the state or local level. So any transit organization has to fund itself directly, either through cooperative funding, going to all of the communities that it might try and serve, as well as getting grants. They usually partner with universities as well, but when you're in the rural part where there isn't a university, you're really reliant on where the bus needs to go to get the funding in place. So Brundage has been a major backer for pretty much all of time at this point, in large part because Brundage employees are big users of transit to get from Meadows House to the rest of the community where the grocery store is. And I think they're a good example of how great you can make rural transit if those who actually use it are funders for it. So we need to learn more about making the routes efficient. I don't think they've updated where the bus goes in about 10 years. So we're trying to figure out if we're actually serving everyone we possibly could. And then this one is kind of what we're working towards at this point. Our relationship has been a bit of an incubator for where we've both gone over the last probably 2 years, in that we've said, okay, well, we're talking about it. Who can we bother the ears off of next so that they talk to us too?
Yeah, and I feel like, building these partnerships and collaborations with other ski resorts, with local stakeholders and businesses, federal government, state government, it's really aligning our power to develop a sustainable solution for our community. And so with these collaborative partnerships, we can provide resource sharing with each other, we can have a regional impact and a local impact, and we can provide innovation as well when we come together and bring our ideas together. We also have an enhanced community buy-in, especially with Brundage, because we are such a big stakeholder in the community, and we can really change that culture and drive sustainable solutions. And there's cost saving there too as well. And then there's stronger advocacy and influence. And yeah, Brundage just really has that influence in our local community because we are a really small community.
So the big project that we bid off pretty much starting a year ago was in looking at our upcoming climate action plan, that it's the first of its kind in our mountain community in McCall. We decided that we needed to have our mountain right beside us in that effort. And so I marched over to Brundage and said, I think you guys need a greenhouse gas emissions inventory so that we can know like what problems we're trying to solve in a year's time. And like what grants we need to write you guys into in 2 years' time, for example. So in September of 2023, I marched over there and said, do you guys want to do a big, long math project? And they said, Rachel wants to do it. Congratulations.
Yeah,
So then the quirky part came to be that resources for actually conducting a greenhouse gas emissions inventory when you are two young women in the middle of nowhere are limited to a municipal ICLEI membership. Because online software and or textbooks are really, really complicated. So with ICLEI's permission, we were able to run basically like a private resort protocol through the local government protocol via ICLEI, which was a really fun learning experience. And so we puttered away at that, and you should probably just talk about the experience of your first one.
Yeah, it was really time consuming, and I didn't really have much resource except for Meredith. And so her experience in doing multiple really helped me get through that, and her support emotionally was huge for me. Because I sometimes, like full-time work, full-time grad student over here, I really needed that. And so we actually partnered with Western Colorado University, and they did our food and beverage inventory. And so that was super helpful as well. And then there was challenges to that as well with that.
And I'll plug in this moment, like whoever your inventory staff is, when it's that time of the year or time of the 5 years or whatever, please provide a mandate that that person be helped with getting the information they need, because that can make the project go from being 8 months long to like 3 weeks long. So like, please just get fungible data in your organizations and make it traceable, because it can be fast, but it usually isn't, unless anyone's an expert in going fast.
And yeah, working really connected with the finance department to get all of that information, and then finding all the gaps and what we can do with the gaps, and just filling that in without the data. So the greenhouse gas inventory project for Brundage was a huge step in our sustainability goals in partnering with the city of McCall. We want to take steps to show the power of effective collaboration amongst our stakeholders, drive sustainable initiatives, and have shared goals within the community. The Climate Action Plan addresses both municipal and regional environmental challenges. And with the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan from McCall, we want to address the community's emissions and resource use. And we really want to create this resilient community capable of addressing these climate challenges. And our partnership is essential in doing so.
So these are kind of graphically compared what our emissions bubbles look like. I think it would be fun in the future to see like a book at this conference of like your towns or your county bubbles next to the resort bubbles, because I think that jurisdictional boundaries are necessary, but they're also inherently made up when we're talking about the atmosphere. So I think it could be really, really cool to see like what do all of our organizations look like in this format, because it's really, you know, it's interconnected. And even looking at it now, my brain is like rattling off all of the different ways that like, what can we add to this list to make these bubbles smaller? What other bubbles do we need to add to this list from people who never bothered to measure it yet? That, and the other. So all the data nerds probably feel the same way.
I also just want to add here, like, if you look at our employee commute at 61.3% of our total greenhouse gas inventory, we're really trying to look at that number and see what we can do to incentivize our employees to use public transportation. It's free, and how do we incentivize carpooling? So we have a really great carpooling incentive where we fill up people's gas tank that carpool together.
So I'll probably let you take this, Rachel, but this was, we just made up a protocol for doing food and bev emissions inventorying because we could not find any academic journal articles that had actually like figured out how to do it efficiently. Some people had followed like a grain of wheat from wherever it was harvested to where it was turned into bread. We were like, that doesn't help me. So if anybody does have a great food and bev resource, let us know. But if you don't, this is our method.
Yeah, please share with us, because we did use the Floop app, or the grad students did, and it was really challenging to get all of the data from food and beverage. We had gaps in our data. We did not have a set menu with what we were ordering, what we were using, and so being able to just plug in what we had was, how we address this.
And so we took the sum total of all of the chits or tickets that had been ordered during the fiscal year of every single item or every single menu item or every single like open food item that is randomly input, and went through and slowly made assumptions, making up recipes that seemed to work or align within this Floop app of carbon emissions per meal. That's really tailored for individuals, but it was the fastest, best, most efficient thing we could find. And then assigning, based on whatever papers we could find, what the emission per ounces of beer or ounces of juice or this or that or the other could be. And then plugging all of that into, I think, like the downstream emissions module in ICLEI ClearPath, something like that.
Fugitive and process
because they don't have food in there.
Yeah.
And then this is what we ended up with. So I think that as researchers, there's like a lot of empty spaces to add to this. Like I believe all of the Floop recipes are based off of like UK food system research. So like those food miles are totally different. They are not in the American transportation system whatsoever. But the cool thing that I hope the grads took away from this experience in the Masters of the Environment program was that like there's still new frontiers of academic research that need their help and need like their observing professors' help as well. Because I think this is a tough nut to crack. And the other vision that I would like to see is like if I go to a ski resort and I want my French fries, like what are the emissions of my French fries? Because it's just quirky.
And I think this is grossly underestimated as well. So driving sustainable action with our greenhouse gas inventory results. We are participating in McCall's climate action plan. We are investigating renewable energy options, sustainable transportation initiatives, like I said, incentivizing our employees, affordable housing solutions, employee commute incentives, hosting EV demo days, and our white bark pine conservation is very important to us. And exploring solutions for waste diversion and enhancing recycling capabilities. And I think this one is important to talk about because we have serious challenges in our waste diversion. No one comes up to get our waste, so we have just roll-off dumpsters. We are unable to recycle because no one will come up and do it. Our local county, Adams County, not Valley County, sorry. So they have not taken our recycling just due to the amount of weight that would come influx into their county. And so we just don't really have those solutions yet, but we are looking and working towards those.
So the chapters or themes of the Climate Action Plan in McCall, in the McCall area at this point, probably look familiar to everyone who's already undergone this process, but we had to kind of disguise them a little bit from your classical, like, buildings and facilities, energy, nature-based solutions, and then, yes, we have transportation. But we decided to turn it towards destination management and low-impact tourism as a focus area, because that's like our key population driver of our emissions with such a low population. And then instead of just having renewable energy, we have renewable clean energy options, buildings and facilities, and like the human realm, the public realm of McCall, all in one chapter and focus area, because we think we're going to have more leverage with our zoning code than our building code, so we really want to focus on like the relationship and character of place being one that's sustainable, rather than like a building by building, square foot by square foot analysis, because that's just what we have power over. And then our other big one is transportation, and that doesn't even include the emissions traveling up to McCall on the 2-lane highway that serves us next to an abandoned railroad right-of-way that's been sold back. I'm like, what did you do that for? And it'll be a big journey of education and behavior change across all of those things. Bum, ba-da-bum. And then this was just some outreach that we were doing. We kicked it off here about a month ago, doing participatory budgeting with our community. So we chose to use some beans, counting the beans, and having attendees of our local Chamber Fall Festival. So it's really a celebration in our local community of what it means to be a local and survive the summer season. So there's just a lot of families there who came, and the feedback was actually really, really encouraging, because so many people we didn't know would actually care about getting into climate action planning said, I'm so glad you're doing this. I don't know what it holds over the next year, but I'm so glad you guys are taking this step. So I think that that gave a much needed boost of like confidence rather than fear, that people are silently supportive of these efforts in our community. And so we need to tell the story of like activating those ideas and bringing efforts for action forward. The really exciting part to me about our action plan is we're going to partner with the Nez Perce tribe, who is the only area in Idaho that actually won CPRG funding. They have an incredibly innovative renewable energy and energy storage microgrid resilience project that is a really great model, I think, nationally. And it's all motivated by anything that can help the salmon and reduce the strain on the salmon population on the lower Snake Rivers is a climate action for them. So producing energy to try and replace the energy that's created through the dam network is a main driver of their climate actions at this time. And I think it's really special for us to partner with them and figure out ways that maybe we can't do our own solar garden in McCall, but we could further invest in the solar work that they're doing up on the reservation in Lapway as a connected steward of the place that's home to them.
So if these problems that we're having resonates with you guys, and again, this could be 20 years ago, what would you do? What challenges did you face? What was your solution to these challenges? How did you overcome all of these challenges that we're facing in rural Idaho? And do you have any solutions that we should know about?
I think this is also a moment where if you're like an entrepreneur in the climate space, there's a lot of work available for you in Idaho. So opportunity is knocking. Let it in. But we really wanted to open up this last, I don't know if it's a half an hour or 40 to something like that, to a really conversational space Tom is our climate action consultant there, and he's actually taking notes on this, and then I'm happy to like share it out in the future. But we really wanted to like let you dump your sufferfest of problems, and then if you have a solution that you've experienced in your community, we can add it to our long list of like research, and do it that way. So I'll yield and run a mic around, and we'll go nuts. I said I would run.
I could probably speak loud enough, but I'm kind of curious on your food measurement. Are you looking at options to source your food locally to drive that cost down, one, to make it healthier, organic food growing near your area, as well as different ranchers to take your meat costs down and your other cost, providing healthier food for your guests as well? Have you even looked at measuring that and seeing what that difference makes?
Yeah, I'm currently working with the director of food and beverage to look at those options and opportunities. We just got her on our staff, so we're working towards that. Pending.
Yeah, and we have at the city a local agriculture research plan from a grad about 2-3 years ago who's identified there's great potential for regenerative ag with especially our cattle farmers in the valley. And then working with a few of the local growers in their really short growing season to maybe subsidize some greenhouses and vertical farming. But we haven't looked at like food miles traveled or consolidating the transportation system or figuring out like a more interconnected food system, other than it's a great vision. But I think it would be really cool to measure like in a case study what's the impact. Other questions?
Maybe it's more of a comment. That's allowed too. Where I grew up in northern Michigan, Mackinac Island is this island that's 8 miles around, and their recycling program was pretty unique, and they were doing it even in the 90s. I guess it wasn't really called recycling back then, you know, but because they were an island, they did not have a landfill. So literally every piece of trash got sorted out, and then they would, you know, pay other communities to take on their landfill items, and then they would pay somebody else to take care of their recyclables. And I'm just throwing that out there. I think on their website last time I looked, there's like enough articles in history about it in case you're interested in kind of picking that apart. But they still do it. They have limited landscape, you know, to keep the refuse on the island. So it's kind of unique what they're doing. Yeah. And then I have one other question, I guess. I think it's awesome, your relationship between the ski resort and your town. That seems very impossible to me for where I live. And I don't know if anybody in this room has a recommendation or even a sliver of an idea. But I'd be interested to hear that because, you know, it's like a community with a corporation, and it's so complicated.
Well, that's a great segue because I was going to actually just, not that we have any solutions. Obviously, we're still here working on all this stuff, but I think what you're doing is exactly the right approach, which is having the ski area get involved with the town, you know, and to your point. And at A Basin where I work, you know, we're really closely involved with all the Summit County community groups, our local government, you know, our conservation center. You know, we have folks other than the sustainability team in our leadership that are members of boards of our transportation Summit Stage, which is our free bus system. So I think just having the resort, which is obviously a key player in all these communities, represented is super key. And then on the other side, we as the resort folks can kind of, I think, mirror what the town or the community more broadly is doing. You know, if you're a visitor, how much sense does it make if like your signage at the resort is just different than your signage at, you know, the welcome center? So simple things like that and making sure you're aligned are huge in driving the results, I think.
Thanks.
And yeah, to your point, I feel bad for your town that you don't feel like you have buy-in.
I live in Frisco.
Oh, well, who are you complaining about? They're involved.
I'm just saying I share a zip code with
Got it. That's true. That's true. Yes, but copper does come to the meetings too, and we work very closely with HC3s in the back. But yeah, it's a valid
question
point.
right here.
So kind of a question. Do you know how much, have you done like an audit, like a waste audit to know your tonnage? And this is like both McCall and from a recycling and waste diversion perspective. And have you looked at like a mini MRF for a kind of localized, and then finding people that can help you get that material to end markets?
So yes, I've proposed a composter at Brundage, and we also got a cardboard baler, so that takes a lot of waste out. But the tonnage, I do have that data, and it's alarming the amount of tonnage and money that's spent in that. And yeah, let's talk. Okay.
And on the city end, we were finally made independent on our solid waste management in 2014, exclusively to get bear-proof trash containers to the opt-in solid waste customers. So we currently have an RFP out for a comprehensive solid waste management program, and that was done with as much information as it could be done with, but we've only received one quarterly report from our solid waste provider in 20 years. So that was our starting point for that RFP. And that request for proposals does include a biannual waste audit, so that we don't fall victim to the same 20-year experience that we've had. And I think a lot of it is the result of not having a dump within Valley County, so all of the waste is being taken out of sight, out of mind, and not having people that are educated in how solid waste management works within the community to ask the right questions until the most recent 4 years or so. So we have a lot to learn, but I think as we get actual data from what's coming into going out of our community, we'll probably see that a MRF is absolutely necessary.
One other suggestion is Colorado has a great organization called EcoCycle that has a really cool kind of like regional collaborative system, particularly for hazardous and household waste, hazardous household waste, thank you, including like electronics and chemicals and so forth, where neighboring communities can come. It's kind of like a co-op system. So they have a really cool kind of setup that might be something to look at.
And before it escaped my brain, I actually wanted to provide a comment on like it's kind of like romantic that we get along so well or whatever, because it is. But I think our community is so small that we haven't built up these weird barriers. Like one of our inspirations for doing this presentation was the last couple years of watching this conference. Like there's noticeable animosity between mountain and town that we don't really experience, because I'm literally married to a mountain employee, or I'm almost married to a mountain employee. So to us, there's like no beef or whatever. Like there's still the beef of like everybody's growing, everybody's developing, but we were kind of like, let's prevent whatever that is going on over in Colorado or whatever, and like get coffee and ski together and like work on things that we can partner on. And a big thing we're excited about launching in the next couple months is like Brundage is trying to offer an exchange pass with our municipal golf course so that ski area employees can golf for free and city employees can ski for free. Trying to build these relationships so that there's not a weird crevice between us at any point, since it's preventable at this point.
And we are lucky because it's co-beneficial for us, and we do get along so well. So that's wonderful.
Since your community has dealt with multiple climate disasters, has there been any collaboration in your disaster management plans to integrate with your climate action and sustainability plans and goals?
Gently, with the right vocabulary, yes. Especially this summer, the Boise State Hazard Climate and Resilience Institute utilized Valley County as a FEMA test project to create a hazard map for the entire Valley County area. And they co-created that tool with stakeholders from both public agencies spanning the entire county area, Forest Service, the various fire districts. We have 3 different fire districts in the county that are independent. The sewer districts, there's 2 of them. Central District Health, which manages all of the septic tanks. The U.S. Geological Survey. So we really found that the county's core struggle when thinking about hazard is that the data is so scattered across everywhere. That's probably like normal unless you have a robust GIS program at your town. But if you don't, you're literally in the basement looking at 60-year-old maps because they haven't been up to change the soil survey in a long while. Whatever fire information is on its own map. And so what this county risk mapping project did through Boise State was layer all of those things by natural disaster type. And then like the housing stock and social vulnerability scores and indices. And then that was enough of a tool to have the county say yes to the same group conducting a resiliency plan. So they're kicking that off in November for Valley County. Whether they will say the word climate change or call it something else in that document, I am not sure, but I don't really know how you talk about having multiple wildfire evacuations in residential areas in our county and within our watershed where there could be a flood after fire event without tiptoeing a little bit closer to the subject. So, good question.
Do you guys have pay parking at the ski hill and on Main Street?
Is that a personal question? Okay. No, it's currently free.
I'm the mayor of Whistler, and for a very long time, I thought your question here is very interesting. About 20 years ago, we were going into the Olympics, and there are so many costs that are absorbed by a very few number of people because our only tax tool is property tax. And so back then it was about 10,000 people, basically funding 25% of British Columbia's tourism economy. And so we went as part of the negotiation on the Olympics and negotiated ownership of our parking lots, some tools around taxing hotel rooms. And I am of the opinion that solving big problems requires those with the most money to do that work for us. And that means the ski hill charging for parking and taking that money and giving it free of charge to more transit. People aren't going to ride transit unless it's often. They just won't get on your bus because they don't want to have to wait or know what a schedule is. And so that's one of the things that we've really paid attention to is how can we help Vancouverites fund this, and how can we help people from all around the world who fly to Whistler fund this? And that's a constant conversation. And I think the first step, and maybe the hardest step, is pay parking that goes to fix this problem. Your number is about the same as ours, 75% second homeowners. And that's a huge number of people who I think want a great town and want to contribute. And we have to give them the ability to do so. But it takes, I think, tough decisions like deciding you're going to charge people for parking, and they'll be very angry, I promise.
Riots will ensue.
Yeah, it's
But
definitely on the to-do list.
on the to-do list for sure.
and very, very high on it. And we're all bracing for the moment that it gets mean. Like an anecdote of why we're hesitant on that is we got death threats from Australia when we wanted to prohibit feeding wildlife. So that's kind of like the dial calibrated on how controversial things get. But the paid parking is pretty high on both the comprehensive plan, climate action plan, to-do list. And I imagine when it happens at Brundage, it'll be the same chaotic situation. Our death threats did, yeah. Along with other places in states, but yeah. I could run away faster.
Hey, my name's Tommy Reuther. I'm with Wisp Resort in Maryland. My question is more directed towards you and how how your position came to be in the first place. How did you justify it? I think you've more than paid for yourself with all the programs that you've that you've put together. But what were the beginning stages of that, like, of justifying a sustainability position in a municipality for a rural community?
So I was born in 1997. That's how it began. No, no. So what happened was it was quite fortuitous. I got into the McCall Outdoor Science School Environmental Education and Science Communication program at the U of I campus in McCall. And then I kind of walked into and started banging down the door to get the city internship that year to complete the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Like, my professor advisor read my thesis and was like, "Oh, you know how to do that." And I was like, "Yeah, give me the job." And then unbeknownst to me, I'm not really sure how it happened, but I think he probably worked with my boss, since it's such a small town, to say, like, I have this person in my graduate program with an urban planning background, and I know that you need to hire another planner, which is a very rare event. Can you turn her internship into employment? And then I was very, very supported by my then boss in making sure that while completing my job responsibilities in land use planning as a starter offer planner, she really, really cultivates personal interest. So shout out to all of you hiring managers and or overseers or supervisors of people. Like, if you have people who care about climate on your staff, let their freak flag fly. So I conducted another emissions inventory for fun on hours, like I was paid for it. Continued the ICLEI membership, continued presenting to city council and learning the ropes of presenting to council as a young employee. And they were like, "Usually assistant planners don't do this." And I was like, "Well, look at me, I'm doing it." And then towards like my 3-year mark during my evaluation, I was like, I think I'm bored now and could use more compensation and written responsibilities in the word sustainability, please, thank you. And boss lady said yes. So I think it's probably a combination of having a really, really supportive supervisor who strategically plans the future role of municipal employees within the organization. Like, she has a 20-year horizon for all of us, because she always thinks in 20 to 30-year increments. That's what planners do. And then the other part of it is threading the needle objectively as both a young woman in local government, young woman in a STEM-ish workforce, and saying, like, this is the right thing to do objectively. So give me a reason why not. And so far, nobody said no. And that goes well for me. Other questions? I'm going to go to him because you were okay.
Quick question. I want to go back to, you had mentioned some of the collaborations that you've had, and which ones have you seen success in? And also, as a resort that's part of IndyPass, has there been a broader approach through IndyPass to really take more action across the pass as well, outside of just your resort, but with the others collectively?
For the Indy Pass, no. I think that there needs to be future discussions on that with the GM and Indy's representatives. But what was your first question? Sorry.
Examples of collaboration that have been successful.
Yeah, so I've been traveling down to Boise. I talked with the city of McCall, toured their composting plant. Then I was able to meet with Bogus Basin, with Josie and Nate, and really just learning how they're tackling these climate issues and how you turn that into action. And then really my collaboration with the city of McCall is the most successful, because we are looking at how to align, because our community is just so different than Boise. Like, the Bogus can, get their recyclables and food waste down to Boise. It's 40 minutes. We're 3 hours from Boise, and our area just doesn't really offer that to us. So our partnership is the most successful, I would say. And then we partner with the U.S. Forest Service because we operate under a special use permit. And so working with them to find ways to develop sustainably as much as possible and how we can protect our natural ecosystems.
I think another good example too has been like the outdoor school summer camp. That
yeah.
just this most recent year, especially during the Animo program, which was our Spanish language learners or English language learners program for outdoor experiences, where a lot of Spanish-speaking students got out there, and we planned for a mountain biking day for them. For many of them, it was their first time learning how to ride a bike in our community, but they reached out to me, I reached out to Brundage and said, do you have any kid-sized bikes that we could plant for this day 3 times over the course of the summer, so that if these kids need them, whether they come from a family that's on the mountain biking team or they come from a low-income family where they're learning to ride a bike for the first time, what do you think? And she was like, yep.
Done.
Like,
And,
so
and
yes
that's another
mentality.
success is
Yes.
us aligning together to, take care of the community.
Yes.
So in your area, Tamarack was a relatively new ski area to come out, and the McCall area and the supporting ski areas have seen some significant growth. I know Brundage has a significant expansion plan, so does Tamarack. How much pushback are you getting locally, and does integrating renewables, whether it be solar or other options, and all the new build-outs help you overcome any local opposition or state opposition, but also help you move that permitting process forward?
Yeah, so the development at Brundage does get a lot of pushback from the local community because they want things to be the same. And that's just not how it's going to go. And our MDP is ambitious, and we're working through that. With years like last year, that slows us down. We can't just develop quickly. And also, when we have things like the Mountain Adventure Center already set in place before my position, it's really challenging to start solar after that. But looking at solutions moving forward is a big priority of mine and Brundage's.
Yeah, and I think conversely, this might be like the one spot where your ears burn when I talk, is like, since we can't touch at the local level those building codes or say you must do solar, we can only be a commenter in the expansion process or special use permit process, and we keep saying, like, when are we going to get help reconstructing the bridge you have to cross to get to Tamarack, or like, when is the community going to receive help from this and that and the other? And the feedback, or like, is the resort going to provide as many local housing units as the employment need that they create? Those are always our questions that we provide on the expansion plans, and thus far the response or the feedback, mostly anecdotally at this point, has been like, well, that's the local government's responsibility, is to apply the regulations necessary to mitigate those factors. And we're like, we literally can't. So I think at this point, like, there's the verbal advocacy where we all acknowledge, yeah, there's the workforce housing need, but I'm kind of hoping to see the Forest Service evolve into kind of comparing what their power is with local government power in some places, maybe especially Idaho. I'm not sure about the conditions in other states where we are preempted, and that there's so much development on the resort land and properties and within this special use permit space that, like, could we have that conversation? 'Cause maybe then that would elevate the entire county's ability to react, right? But it's a good philosophical quandary. I know it would cost the resorts money. So yeah. Other question? Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that's where my original comment was coming from. 'Cause we don't really have beef with each other.
Oh, sorry.
But, just how to solve some of those problems together. I mean, like, my town shares a zip code with a resort community, and it just kind of makes sense. And I think that's where I was coming from earlier.
No beef, just shrimp.
And just to comment on that, I think the ski resorts need to take responsibility of that they want to drive those changes within the resort and then align with the city of McCall. And we're also located in Adams County, so it's outside of Valley County where McCall is located. So there's a difference there.
And then I think like one or two. One more.
I had a question about the greenhouse gas emissions calculations that you did. So I'm familiar with the National Ski Association has a climate challenge, and they do the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So it's the direct petroleum burning, and then also what's the energy you buy. But you seem to really dive into those indirect effects like commuting and the food. And I wonder, like, what lessons did you learn? What sort of things did you feel like were going too far in calculating your greenhouse gas? And what would you encourage other people to look at in those calculations?
Yeah, I think that understanding the employee commute is really important for Brundage because we are located outside of city and we don't have a bus service that comes all the time. And what I learned was that a lot of people really like their convenience. They want to come and go as they please. They don't really want to change their habits. Yeah, I don't know how else to answer that. Yeah.
And I think, like on my side, going a little bit deeper on inventorying, like that was what I did in college. Was like, what is this? What are all these farts? I just call it the world of farts. Is everything that farts is what I want to look at. And no, that's how I bring people into the conversation. They're like, oh, that made me giggle. I kind of like it. And then they see like a car exhaust pipe, and they're like, fart. Make it funny, whatever. Do little kid jokes. But the thing that I kind of connected looking at Brundage is as like a microcosm of McCall, where like as these resort communities or as these destination communities where people they're expending a lot of carbon resources to come to us, right? I don't want, and I objectively do not think that the people coming to visit us should be able to mentally escape the fact that there's an environmental drain coming to visit us. And I think that we all need to be honest as these communities that if our emphasis economically is going to be mainly tourism, we need to talk about it. Because maybe we are that educational hub that they're not getting wherever they're coming to us from. So if we can be open and talk about it clearly and say like, there are impacts here, then maybe that's where that scope 3 or unmeasured outside of the scope of your protocol is. But it still exists out in the world. And if the person whose responsibility is, such as like our county is like technically the scope for a lot of the measurements that we're not counting, like if they're not willing to do an inventory, like that doesn't erase the fact that it's there, right? So that's, did I do anything with that information? No, but do I wish somebody would? Yeah, everybody, yeah. And you can ask me after, but I have to dismiss the class. Sorry. Thank you so much. That was fun.
And by the way, guys, this is our contact information, so
Can you go to the last one?
please reach out. Thank you so much.